under a risk of severe storms.
Severe weather.
Severe thunderstorms.
Severe weather. Tornado warning in effect. And maybe ongoing storms.
And that is going to be fuel for future thunderstorm development.
Severe weather later on the risk for severe weather.
Studies are showing that Tornado Alley may be shifting east.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control. We shall propose, finally, a global systems of communication satellites linking the whole world in telegraph and telephone and radio and television.
The foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layers and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
I'm John McKenzie. One of the most exciting developments in science today concerns the possibility that it may one day be possible to modify and perhaps even control weather and climate. What this could mean in terms of hurricane and flood control and reduction of damage to property, crops, and livestock would be measured in billions of dollars for the United States alone. The value in terms of human welfare for the entire world defies calculation.
You told the Associated Press that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest. Would you explain what you were trying to say?
Well, what I was trying to say is exactly what I said. There is weather control techniques. We have a complete package on that, which I did not bring, but I certainly will see to it that it is brought in for the record. Number 1, the entire patents on the equipment. Number 2, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilize it as far back as the Vietnam War.
A little over a decade later, the U.S. military conducted experiments to bring weather to the battlefield. October 1966. The Vietnam War is in full swing. U.S. military scientists are devising a way to slow down enemy forces using the weather.
The U.S. had gone from advisor status to in-field combat status, and were not doing well. As a result of not being able to make progress on the ground, the U.S. went to bringing the battle into the atmosphere above the battlefield.
The Air Force employed a groundbreaking military directive called Project Popeye.
Project Popeye was a weather modification program that involved cloud seeding, and the idea was to produce or exaggerate the monsoon rains that are traditional in that region.
Experiments are carried out beforehand with a military aircraft dropping silver iodide crystals in clouds over a strip of the Laos Panhandle, east of the Belovans Plateau in the Sekong River Valley. 50 cloud seeding runs are conducted. 82% of the clouds seeded produce rain within a brief period.
So Project Popeye then became Operation Popeye.
To ask a couple questions here about HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Several of you at the table have a little bit of a piece here. As you know, this is located up in Alaska. It's currently funded by the Air Force Research Lab. It was formerly funded by the Office of Naval Research. One of the prime customers is DARPA, which is currently running experiments at the facilities here. Then to Dr. Walker and Mr. Schaefer then, Dr. Walker, your agency is currently running the facility. I've mentioned that it's our understanding through the president of UAF that the plans are to move forward and demolish the facility this summer. So the question to you is that accurate? Can you explain why? And then perhaps to both you and Mr. Schaefer, is there any benefit in exploring a potential relationship with the University of Alaska to perhaps take over the hub?
Thank you, Senator. The Air Force has gotten great value out of HARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it. And, but that work has been completed.
We're able to utilize that signal sent in sequence to generate a incremental deviation in the flow path of these oceanic atmospheric rivers. So the source is the ocean, of course. The vapor, precipitable moisture flow is in the atmosphere. The winds drive this with the pressure systems adjusting the path of least resistance. But our technology is able to interface that and hack into it, if you like, and makes micro adjustments to allow deviations to occur in the flow pathways. And this is how we broke the drought in Australia in 2005. This is how we put out the fires of Victoria from Black Saturday in 2009. This is how we delivered rain in the desert in Saudi Arabia in 2007 and snow for the first time in history in 2004 in United Arab Emirates. Then we can look at more substantial rains that can be suitable for crop.
What is this technology? Essentially, we're drawing oceanic rain systems that exist over the oceans into geographic targets, into our agricultural areas. The technology uses electromagnetics, so we're not interfering with the atmosphere or with the environment. We're not damaging it. We're not using chemicals fired through rockets like other technologies use. We use a very gentle but powerful technology, launching electromagnetics into the atmosphere to modify the flow of the weather system over the ocean and drawing it into a target. So to try and keep it simple, we establish some kind of link with a weather system, and once we've seen through satellite meteorology that we have that link, we're able to draw that system in incrementally towards the target.
Bloomfield, Michigan, 1942. As World War II rages across several continents, acclaimed architect and eventual designer of the St. Louis Arch, Eero Saarinen, is secretly enlisted by the United States military to work for a new clandestine organization. Its name? The OSS, Office of Strategic Services, or as it is known today, the CIA.
The fact that Eero Saarinen was in the OSS designing weapon systems during World War II, and at a time when the OSS was looking into ways to weaponize weather, makes his whole connection to the design of the St. Louis Arch extremely interesting. Now, that isn't to say I believe it can control the weather, but it does open the door to the idea that it might have been one of the things Saarinen was out to achieve.
Weather modification programs, experimental ones done by private companies, done by the United States government, done by states across the United States, are underway. There's more than 50 of them in operation across the United States. All of these impact agriculture because they change the microclimates needed for agriculture to survive. None of these programs that I know of today, and this is all public record, are available at any time with oversight.
Scientists reported earlier this year Western states are experiencing the worst mega drought in at least 1,200 years.
Yeah, they say climate change has made the issue 72% worse. The drought has fueled wildfires and threatened the economic security of farmers. And now it's endangering the security of energy and water resources for nearly 6 million homes and businesses across 7 states. Lake Powell, the second largest man-made reservoir in the country, is drying up. Now, if water levels at the lake drop another 32 feet, all hydroelectric production would stop at the reservoir's Glen Canyon Dam. Now, the Interior Department is now facing a difficult decision: save water or electricity. Imagine that choice. Now, the crisis is forcing government officials to take drastic measures to keep both power and water flowing to Americans in the West.
Agricultural oversight or public oversight. These programs impact agriculture, and there are programs around the world, international corporations,
are modifying our weather all the time, and they're modifying it in ways that cover thousands and thousands of square miles. Most of it is chemically altered, so that what happens is that we are putting chemicals, ground-based chemicals that are shot into the air, or chemicals coming from airplanes that change and modify our weather.
Yeah, we're in Hyndman, which is Knott County, one of the hardest hit counties, where more than a dozen people were killed, and you see stuff like this all over. This is pretty par for the course. You've got sheds and garages, homes that were ripped out of foundations, Kira, that floated and were washed away, in some cases hundreds and hundreds of yards away from their original destination. You've got street signs, and a little further down there, downstream here, there's furniture behind that orange tubing there that's sort of coiled up. There's a vehicle underneath there. We actually have some GoPro footage of that, and you will see vehicles littered up and down these waterways throughout the entire disaster zone, which is a huge disaster zone, by the way.
All right, can you all hear me well? Good. So first of all, it's a pleasure for me to be part of this symposium. I'm looking forward to the rest of it, and also to be part of discussions on how we can have collaboration perhaps in the future between Yale and Todai. The past discussion was a perfect lead up to my talk. I'm going to continue to talk about aerosols. I'm going to talk about the effect that aerosols can have on ice clouds today, and there's a role to play for those effects both in climate forcing and also in a recently proposed geoengineering mechanism. And I've decided to focus mostly on my work on this geoengineering mechanism today. So I've listed my collaborators for that work below. So I want to start by giving you a short outline of my talks. I'll continue to talk about black carbon for a little bit because I knew that Professor Kondo would talk about that, and talk about also the importance of aerosol effects on clouds in that context. And then I'll move on to talk about cirrus seeding of cirrus clouds. And this is a geoengineering mechanism that was proposed a few years ago. And we've been studying this lately, and so I'm going to try to address the questions of how much to seed, where to seed, when to seed, and how much cooling we could possibly get from this kind of geoengineering mechanism. And then talk about the climate response that we see in our modeling to this kind of geoengineering.
So one of the things that I'm concerned about and that we need to address in the future is how these programs are impacting microclimates needed for our crops to survive and needed for pollination. If we change the growing season, the pollinators may not survive, and also our crops, our flowers, and our tree crops may not get the pollination needed. So one of my areas is looking at this situation to see if we can begin to put under control experimental and other types of weather modification programs.
We've had a lot of cases where we were seeding storms that had no business being seeded. We were just kind of throwing darts, and we were seeing responses to some of those. So we are learning that maybe there's more opportunity with some of these. Maybe we don't even need to have a rain cloud. We could go work cumulocongestus clouds that aren't really precipitating yet. And if it has inflow, maybe we could get something to work. Year one, we had the air tractor that the USDA provided, so dosaging was a lot better. We were getting about 40 to 45 gallons per cloud. That aircraft wasn't available in year two, so we took one of our Comanches and converted it.
5 of the cloud seeding projects that are conducted for rain enhancement purposes, 4 of those are included in this assessment. The projects based in White Deer, San Angelo, Pecos, and Pleasanton. In 2018, there were a total of 262 clouds seeded. On 87 distinct days, we had at least 1 aircraft in the air seeding in order to enhance the output from young thunderstorms.
And so what happens is that many times we're talking about artificially putting chemicals like sulfur or particulates into the atmosphere in what they call geoengineering schemes to reduce and help the planet, supposedly, but help the planet to not go through such a tremendous global climate change and to mitigate global warming. However, the incidence of putting chemicals into our atmosphere is going to change and impact agricultural crop production. And if you take and you put up into our skies chemicals to reduce the amount of sunlight reaching the earth, you are going to begin to reduce crop production. Studies at the University of Illinois on corn crop production show reductions. Without the process of photosynthesis, whereby plants from direct sunlight gain the energy to grow, to produce crops, we are going to find ourselves, if we mitigate in that direction, impacting the crop production not only here in the United States, but worldwide.
The mega drought in the western U.S. is so severe, it's making history. The new study says humans are driving it.
That's one of the stories we're following this morning in our series Climate Control, highlighting the need for smart solutions to confront climate change.
NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is back with us. More on this. Bill, good morning to you. So this mega drought out west has been going on now for 22 years. It shows no signs of letting up right now. How bad is it, and what is the link to human behavior?
Yeah, this is not a record that we wanted to break. It had been well known that the longest lasting mega drought was in the late 1500s, and it was kind of equal to the one we're in right now. But now they've said we've surpassed it, unfortunately, and it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. So let me first explain, maybe you haven't even heard the term mega drought before. So what's a mega drought? Well, a mega drought is a drought that lasts 2 decades or longer, so at least 20 years. And right now we're at year 22 of our drought in the West. And this is the map that shows our current drought. About 95% of the West is in drought. So are humans to blame in greenhouse gas emissions? Well, this study in the Nature Journal says 42% of this drought is linked to human-caused warming. And what's even more alarming is they said that this drought would have ended with the wet seasons in probably 2005 and 2006, and it wouldn't have continued straight through without that warming. So, they're saying that humans are to blame for making this mega drought even worse.
NASA also talks about that that these aircraft leaving persistent contrails are changing our climate. And when they change our climate to the degree that one jet can leave a persistent jet contrail which will spread across our skies from what this picture up here on my left on the screen looks like, which is a trail left by a jet. That trail can expand to 4,000 kilometers and last for 20 hours. This was unheard of in the early 60s and the 70s, and it wasn't until the late 1980s that there was a change and we started to have persistent jet contrails that persist. NASA studies show that part of our global warming problem could be attributed to these types of contrails and the jets that leave them. So one of the issues as we go through is, how do you like your skies, natural or man-made? And right now we are making man-made clouds, and this is trapping warmth in our atmosphere. The climate change that is produced by these jets, not all jets, mostly some non-commercial, but what happens to our skies is that we start to see the changes.
An update now on Tropical Storm Ida, of course, hit the Louisiana coast as a Category 4 hurricane. Shepard Smith has the latest for us from CNBC headquarters. Shep.
David, the 5th strongest hurricane to hit the U.S. mainland in recorded history. It hit about 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and it wasn't until this morning at sunrise that some of it began to calm down. Take a look at the loop as it came in here. You can see where it came in, and as it did, it went not over land. After landfall, it was still over water for the next 3 or 4 hours. So the intensity of the storm remained very high for at least 6 hours. Eventually, an area just west of New Orleans got 17 inches of rain in just 20 hours. Now, 4,900 National Guard troops are out to try to assess the situation. One person did die, according to authorities in Ascension Parish, when he went outside to check on trees on his property.
Fire and flood are causing more death and destruction across the nation.
Record flooding in Kentucky has now claimed 37 lives, and a fierce new fire in Northern California has killed at least 2 people.
We stayed because we were in a 2-story home, and we thought we would have been safe. The rain just kept coming. It wouldn't stop coming. The rain wouldn't stop.
The man-made clouds do trap the warmth, and they increase the humidity. This allows for pests to proliferate, diseases, molds, mildews, funguses, and viruses. This is a man-made cloud, ladies and gentlemen, and these pictures I took myself over Northern California. And this is a burst. This is where a jet left a huge plume. And then this turned in at the end of it to a burst. And this is not normal. Never seen before in our county historically, and I was born and raised there. This is another picture showing the jet trail just before the burst. This is our skies, and I want you to know that what you're seeing now, a lot of times many scientists know, especially at NASA and in other areas, that the skies that we're seeing are not normal cloud formations. These are man-made. And what happens as we reduce the amount of sunlight in a form of global dimming, we reduce the solar power with these type of clouds, and we reduce photosynthesis, which is going to impact agriculture. The pictures look odd. The formations don't look like normal clouds that people have seen before historically. This is another type of man-made cloud, and what we have done and what you're seeing here is we have the photographs from the times that the jet leaves the first trail as a thin, spindly trail to where they form into these different types of cloud formations. All of you can start looking up and seeing this. What happens is that there are experiments, and there's a color, you can see some color in this photograph. And part of what we're doing also is we're sending up canisters. The United States government, NASA, the U.S. Air Force, is sending up canisters into the atmosphere filled with chemicals to modify and experiment with our ionosphere. And when we modify and experiment with our ionosphere up here, we create experiments which they can see through these persistent jet contrails as they stay in the sky for long periods of time, and they can watch the experiments. The type of chemicals they are using are aluminum, barium, strontium, and these canisters are sent up on rockets, and what they do is they superheat the canisters to create experiments in our atmosphere. The experiments can give you colorful auroras, which they talk about as being wonderful. Many times people think that the auroras in Alaska and the ones we see are normal, but there's beginning to be more and more seen across the United States and elsewhere where aluminum, trimethyl aluminum experiments to make clouds are beginning to impact us. The reason I am concerned for agriculture is that none of these experiments have any public oversight nor agricultural oversight. Our drinking water is impacted because the chemicals are now beginning to show up in our drinking water.
On clear days, you can often see long white lines being traced high in the sky. They are contrails of jet aircraft, actually long, slender clouds. Weathermen are finding them especially fascinating because a theory is being developed that those long white lines may be changing our weather for the better. Details from Roger O'Neill.
Cloud seeding is the most common type of weather modification, and it has many different techniques and applications. Today, it's mostly used to increase rain and snowfall, reduce the size of hail, and reduce fog at airports.
Traditionally, cloud seeding has been done from the air. So airplanes have had racks on them where these same flares are positioned on the airplane, and the airplane flies into the storm. So in order to reduce the cost to the client and reduce our carbon footprint, we've been able to station these on the ground. Now, we can do this in places where weather permits.
Behind a barbed wire fence designed to keep away curious cattle, the cloud seeding gear awaits the right kind of weather.
So these are referred to as AHOGs. That stands for Automated High Output Ground Seeding Systems. We've got 3 primary components of our equipment here. The first is the control module that you see behind me. Then we have our actual cloud seeding flares. The cameras for security. It also helps us observe weather conditions in real time and make sure that all of the equipment is operating correctly during a storm. Inside these canisters are the flares with the seeding agents. The canisters are used as spark arresters, so they prevent sparks from reaching the ground. So we pull off the spark arrestor, you can see the flare inside. The ignition of the flares are controlled from a control module that's behind us. So the white triangle there is a cell service modem, and then the solar panel keeps us powered. Inside we have a battery and then a control board. So the control board interacts with the software. We're linked or synced with the software in Utah currently, and that allows us to fire or ignite any of the flares from that remote location.
These artificial clouds will block the sun from evaporating more water to feed the hurricane. The reports coming into the control center indicate that the diversionary cloud seeding over Kansas is now creating a flood danger. Specially equipped robot aircraft are dispatched immediately to release a high concentration of cloud seeding material into the fringes of the storm. Heavier seeding from the ground also helps to subdue the rain by spreading it over a wider area. The controller calls for another view of the hurricane, which has now moved closer to the coast.
Signal out on number 1 satellite. 10-minute interruption for correction. Have you anything else in the area?
Satellite station S1 is approaching area. We'll make contact. S1, this is Weather Central. Request video signal at grid coordinates COCO.
An emergency situation has developed. In an orbiting space station 1,000 miles above the hurricane, a crewman sends a temporary picture back to Weather Central.
Okay, S1, your video is R5S5. Thank you.
The hurricane has stopped moving toward the coast, but is still intensifying. It must be made to move northward and out to sea. This is a crisis.
Aberdeen Station. Activate multiple seeding rockets on course 117.
The controller decides to fire cloud seeding rockets just ahead of the hurricane, hoping to start it moving. Slowly, the hurricane begins to shift. All available forces have been brought into play. Now we can only watch and wait. After hours of tension, the turning point is reached. Latest reports indicate the control strategy is successful. At last, the high-pressure ridge has settled along the coast, forming an invisible wall of safety. The storm is over. The danger has passed. The hurricane has been defeated, turned away from the land, and left to spend itself harmlessly far out at sea. In the world of tomorrow, weather control will enrich and safer than violent storms. We will turn the destructive elements of today into new sources of power, shaping the land on which we live. All mankind will benefit. Arid wastelands will be made green and fertile, and vast frozen areas will become productive. To this end, man-made satellites will probe the secrets of the skies. They will be our eyes in outer space.